Welcome back to Revolution and Ideology series on the Mau Mau Rebellion in Kenya. We're picking up in 1954 with the declaration of Operation Anvil by the wildly oppressive British colonial power. In 1954, 25,000 Britons eventually quarantined Nairobi and began to purge all Kikuyu, Meru, and Embu tribal members through a temporary imprisonment process and a screening at what was called the Langata camp. The Mau Mau, or admitted Mau Mau, or accused Mau Mau, were further detained. Kikuyu women and children were sent to what were called reserves that were becoming increasingly overcrowded. As many as 50,000 Kikuyu were sent to these reserves in 1954 alone. There was also co-optation of other Kenyans that were not part of the three aforementioned tribes, and this created a new group of colonial power. In this case, it was Kenyans controlled by the British, used to abuse other Kenyans. They were called the Home Guard, and these Home Guard were manned by individuals called askaris. The screening process, or as the settlers began to call it, the British settlers in this case, the third degree was carried out by all layers of both British and other Kenyan authority. So it is both, of course, white and black in this case. It's also taken up by the police, and as already mentioned, the askaris, the Home Guard, the British military, and as mentioned in a prior video, vigilante settlers, as well as pseudo-gangsters. So an example of what the screening process looked like, it was essentially torture. And our sources come to us, in this case, from Carolyn Elkins' expose historical book called Britain's Gulag. And I quote, this comes from a man named Kirigumi. "We would be sent to the camp where we would be interrogated. To be interrogated means to be beaten. It wasn't just to be asked questions. It was to be beaten, holding yourself, like this. You would be hit there. You would be beaten here, on the stomach and the back, very hard. You would also place your legs thus and be hit on the ankle, and the other which would go this way and was hit again to go back. Then you would be asked to stand up, and someone else would take your place." Margaret Nyarui says, and I quote, "Questions like the number of oaths I had taken, where my husband went, where two of my stepbrothers had gone. They'd gone into the forest. I was badly whipped while naked. They didn't care that I had just given birth. In fact, I think my baby was lucky it was not killed like the rest. Apart from the beatings, women used to have banana leaves and flowers inserted into their vaginas and rectums, as well as have their breasts squeezed with a pair of pliers, after which a woman would say everything because of the pain. Even the men had their testicles squeezed with pliers to make them confess. After such things were done to me, I told them everything. I survived after that torture, but I still had a lot of pain in my body, even today from it." This is key to understanding how far the colonial power was willing to go to put down this rebellion. They were attempting to get these accused Mau Mau or Mau Mau sympathizers to recount their oathing process. The oathing process that essentially had galvanized them to resist all colonial oppression and essentially force the British to leave Kenya and grant Kenya its independence. These reserves, if you were lucky enough to be taken to a reserve, were fenced in. They were surrounded by spiked moats and guard towers. You were held at gunpoint against your will. Essentially what they were doing, slowly but surely, were concentrating Kikuyu into these camps of torture. I must stress that this happened in the 1950s, after the English had quote-unquote helped the Allies liberate concentration camps throughout Eastern Europe, concentration camps used by Nazis to oppress the Jewish population, gypsies, etc. And they patted themselves on the back for being so heroic, especially the Winston Churchills, who we'll talk about in a future video. And yet, less than a decade later, the British are doing the exact same thing that the Nazis had done in Kenya during Operation Anvil. The hypocritical actions of the British through Operation Anvil eventually led to the pipeline, which we will be talking about in the next video.